Hi guys, it's Shay and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm continuing my read along for ErHa Volume 5. 4, not 5. Sorry. But yeah, I'm like excited but also not. Or not excited, but I'm excited and nervous at the same time, as I tend to be with ErHa just generally. Hi. And also, as I was like taking this off of the shelf for the day, I realized it says here at the back of the book, absence makes the heart burn hotter. And the worst part is I actually I read it as abstinence. Goodness. Anyway, sorry. I just had to tell you guys about that. Hi. I hope the audio is okay, and yeah, we're gonna give it like 4-ish minutes just for anyone who wants to click on a notification if they get any to get here, and that is more or less it. I'm Janae. I do done my read-alongs for anyone who's new here, and we take a 10-minute break round about the hour, and then we continue for the rest. Thank you guys. Okay, cool. So who just random, but who, well, actually kind of appropriate considering what we're doing today. Who's excited and hopeful about there maybe being a release of Immortality tomorrow? I'm like, I'm trying not to get my hopes up, but it is a very, very difficult task. Anyway, okay. I did also quickly want to mention, because I ordered the volume 5 on the day that it was released, but South African shipping and everything like that, because it's coming from overseas, does take a while. So there is a good chance that we're gonna be finished with this before I get my hands on the volume 5, like before it arrives here. So if that is the case, we are gonna be kind of taking a quick interlude, and I'll be reading or continuing with Mordu, and then as soon as I get volume 5, I promise we will be continuing on with that. But I did want to mention, because I checked and it does seem like there is going to be a slight gap between us finishing volume 4 and the arrival of volume 5, if the book is on schedule for where it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be there. So anyway, okay, with all of that said, I can't think of anything that I might have forgotten. Not sure. But yeah, let's quickly open up here so long. Okay, for anyone who is following along with a physical copy, we are on page 189, chapter 137. Shizun and I get settled in. Oh my goodness, okay, that sounds very promising. I mean, the last time they were in together, it did not go well, if I'm remembering correctly, so let's hope this one goes better. Okay. The tips of Moran's fingers quivered slightly, and his heart felt like it was going to beat right out of his chest. The worst thing about men was that the brain between their legs never listened to the brain atop their shoulders. Oh my goodness, what a sentence to start the day off with. Regardless of how much Moran really, truly, wholeheartedly wished it wouldn't, the wretched thing still grew hot and hard, making him feel numb and prickly all over. Cursing himself under his breath, he adjusted how he sat so no one would see before leaning over to dish out another bowl of soup for Chuaneng. But his fingertips were brushed against Chuaneng's as he reached over to hand him the bowl. The contact sent a jolt through his spine that made his hand shudder, spilling a few drops of soup. Chuaneng frowned slightly, but he had more pressing concerns to attend to. He took the soup and gulped it down to ease the spicy numbness in his mouth. Beside him, Moran stared wordlessly at those lips that were vivid red from the spice, like a ripe fruit peeking between leaves or a vibrant blue blossom upon a branch. Lips that, if kissed, would be soft, warm, moist. Can we just banish that word from the English vocabulary? I don't know why I have such an issue with moist, but someone pointed it out as it being a weird word and my brain cannot unhear it. With a sharp crack, Moran slaps himself hard. Everyone stared in surprise. Finally, coming back down to earth, Moran cleared his throat awkwardly and said in a rough voice, "There was a mosquito on my face." Oh, goodness. Ayo, a clear female voice rang out and began to raise a fuss. Autumn mosquitoes are the worst, just looking to suck enough blood to get through the winter. Did Shizun bring any medical salves? Huh? Moran looked towards the source of the voice, somewhat bewildered. The speaker was a fetching young woman, her comely figure wrapped in a blue coat, and her shiny black hair brushed into a braid. She had a pretty face and fair skin, but when she caught his eye, her sultry gaze was anything but shy. Sadly, Moran didn't quite catch on. He only thought, "Oh right, the girl who was singing earlier." Moran might have been slow, but the auntie sitting next to the lass wasn't. She'd borne 7 children, and she could read these little misses like an open book. Without missing a beat, she came in with an assist. They're only here for a few weeks to help with the harvest. Of course they didn't bring any salve. Lingar, go deliver a jar to them later. The last called Lingar beamed happily. Of course, I'll come by tonight. Oh no. No, no, no. You're hitting on the wrong person here. It's always a mosquito. I mean, to be fair, mosquitoes are absolute pain in the butt. Yeah, I don't think it's actually a mosquito this time around. I mean, we know it's not. But it's always funny to me when they're like, "Oh yeah, this massive hickey, it's definitely a mosquito," you know? Um, Moran blinked. This enthusiastic pair had already made the decision before he could get a word in edgewise. He was left a little speechless. He turned to Chuaning and found himself wiping the spilled soup from his hand with a handkerchief, a touch of distaste in his expression. Moran was no good at dealing with women. He said to Chuaning in a small voice, "Some of the soup got on my hand too. Let me borrow the handkerchief when you're done." Chuaning handed it to him, the same high-tongue embroidered handkerchief he'd carried before. Moran remembered he'd had it with him back at Peach Blossom Springs too. Chuaning looked cold and distant, but he was actually a sentimental person. This was something Moran had noticed in his past life. The clues were in the types of clothing he wore and the way the decor in his room stayed mostly unchanged throughout the years. But he hadn't expected it to extend to even the handkerchief. The little square of cloth was so old that the once colourful embroidery had gone dull, yet the nostalgic person still hadn't discarded it. Moran cleaned his hand, then took another look at the handkerchief. Upon closer inspection, he was surprised to find that the flower, although carefully embroidered, was clearly the work of a beginner, with rather poor needlework. He thought his Shizun must have done it himself when he was bored, and he imagined the way he must have looked, all serious and straight-faced, while stitching the high-tongue flower with a tiny little needle. Moran wanted to burst into laughter. Somehow I don't think it's that. Not to say I can't imagine Chuaning doing it because Moran thinks that's what happened. I don't think that's what happened. He wanted to study the handkerchief some more, but Chuaning reached over and retrieved it. "What are you taking it away for?" Moran asked. I'll wash it. I can wash it myself, Chuaning replied, and he picked up his bowl of spicy pork once more. Moran was not about to watch him tempt fate again. He hastily swapped their bowls. Here, have this bowl instead. I haven't touched it. The village chief's wife hurried to agree. It's all right if Shenzhen can't handle the spicy food. No worries, no worries. Xuanlang pressed his lips into a thin line, then lowered his eyes and said, Sorry about that, before exchanging bowls with Moran. Taking Xuanling's bowl and chopsticks in hand, Moran was about to dig in when it struck him that Xuanling had already eaten from the bowl, aka indirect mouth contact, I guess. His heart, suddenly soft and warm, started pounding. He picked up a piece of marbled meat and lifted it to his mouth. The chopsticks scraped past his teeth, sliding past his lips. Oh my goodness, the focus. What improper, preposterous things hadn't he done with Chuaning in the past life? Yet in this one, the mere touch of chopsticks Chuaning had used against his own tongue, the bowl he'd eaten from, held to his own lips. Just these caused the flame within him to grow to uncontrollable proportions. Regardless of how harshly he admonished himself, how many times he told himself not to entertain such indecent thoughts about his pure, virtuous Shizun, it was like his heart wasn't even his. He could keep himself from touching Chuaning, but he couldn't make himself stop thinking about him. Moran had long renounced his hatred of Chuaning. He had imagined that peeling away the hate would leave only feelings of respect and desire to cherish his Shizun. Yeah, definitely, because you didn't have a weird, twisted love and obsession with him in a past life at all, even despite the hatred. But he was wrong. What had been revealed when the black veil of hatred fell away was tender affection and searing desire. He floated in that ocean of desires, wanting to cling to the driftwood of rationality until he could climb ashore. But just one glance from Chuaning, one lightly spoken word, was enough to pull him back down into the abyss of yearning. He felt like he had truly gone mad. Chuaning wasn't into men. Oh, if only you knew, if only you knew. So Moran would sooner die than touch or harass his Shizun. And so the desire in him burned until it was a blazing inferno, swelling until it was a vast ocean, and he drowned and burned, cared for little else save the person before him, this pure person who filled him with improper thoughts. Oh my goodness. The autumn breeze picked up, carrying on its back the fragrance of the harvest and a chorus of frog song, and in that moment, sitting next to Chuaning, Moran had the thought, the absurd, ridiculous thought, that it wouldn't be so bad to spend the rest of their lives like this. He'd once felt like he had nothing, and had fought for everything as if his life depended on it, but now he felt like he had everything, and dared not ask for more. That is a beautiful juxtaposition, oh my goodness. The busy season for these farmers lasted a little over a month, during which Chuaning and Moran would be staying at Yuliang village. The little village would spare 2 rooms for them, but they were rather barren, given how poor the village was. The village chief's wife gritted her teeth and produced 2 thick cotton mattresses for them, only to have her offer declined in unison. Chuaning said, We can sleep on the straw. It's warm enough. Please keep the mattresses for yourselves. Moran agreed with a smile. We're cultivators, you know. We can't just take your bedding like that. The village chief was guilt-ridden. We're really sorry about this, he said over and over. We had more mattresses before, but there was a fire last year where we were beset by an evil spirit, and a lot of things It's alright, Chuaning said. I don't know why I'm immediately thinking that that fire had something to do with the chess piece person. It's alright, Chuaning said. After a few more words of consolation, the village chief and his wife finally excused themselves tremulously. Moran set about adjusting Chuaning's bed, packing more straw the uh, under the padding in hopes of making it softer. He looked rather a lot like a dog dragging cushions and pillows to its nest. That image. Chuaning, leaning against a table and mildly looking on, said, That's enough. Any more and I'll be sleeping in a haystack instead of a bed. A little embarrassed, Moran scratched his head and said, There wasn't time today, but tomorrow I'll go to the nearby market and buy Shizun a proper mattress. And am I supposed to do all the farm work while you go skipping off to the market? Chuaning shot him a glare. Just leave it, it's fine. He walked over and took a sniff. It has the nice scent of fresh straw. Moran protested. No way, Shizun is no good with the cold. You can't just... Chuaning frowned. It's not winter yet. What is all this fuss? Go back to your room already. It's been a long day. I can't even feel my feet anymore. I'm going to bed. Moran left obediently. Chuaning kicked off his shoes, haphazardly rinsed his feet with water from the large clay jar in the room, and was about to climb into his straw bed when he heard knocking on the door. Moran had returned and was calling from the outside, Shizun, I'm coming in. Okay, why do I suddenly feel alarmed? Chuaning was furious. He was speechless for a long moment before eventually snapping, Didn't I tell you not to say that to me anymore? As Chuaning fumed, Moran grinned and nudged the door open with his head. He had to use his head because both his hands, with sleeves rolled to the elbows to reveal firm, shapely, honey-brown arms, was occupied by a steaming basin of clear water. The young man's eyes seemed especially bright behind the steam, practically sparkling. Chuaning's heart raced under his gaze, and he found himself at a sudden loss for words. Moran hauled the heavy basin over and set it down beside his bed. Face glowing and dimples warm, he said, Shizun, you worked too hard today. Soak your feet first, then let me give you a foot rub before you go to sleep. No, I know, Shizun's gonna say no need, Moran said with a smile. But there is a need. It's your first time doing farm work. You're going to be achy all over. If you can't get a good night's rest because of that and can't get up tomorrow, the little kids in the village are going to make fun of you again. Wow, he just really hit him where he knew it would hurt. The water in the wooden basin was hot, slightly too hot, but not unbearably so. Chuaning's bare feet sank into the water, toes smooth and delicate, the lines of his ankles flowing and defined. His feet never saw the sun, and so the skin there was pale and even. Moran, taking it all in, marveled at how nice Chuaning's skin was, even fairer and smoother than that of delicate ladies. Come to think of it, even that woman, Song Chitong, whom he'd married in his past life, hadn't felt as nice as Chuaning did. Totally platonic thoughts here. Bah, what was he thinking about? While Chuaning soaked his feet, Moran sat down at the table across the room and started to read a book. He'd brought it along himself, some dry tome about healing spells. It was so quiet that both unconsciously slowed their breathing so the other wouldn't hear. In that room, lit by a single candle, the only sound was of Chuaning's feet occasionally moving in the water. I'm done soaking. It doesn't ache anymore. You can go now. But Moran was persistent. He knew better now than to take Chuaning at his word when he said things like, It doesn't hurt and I'm fine. He set down his book and came over to Chuaning's bed, where he knelt and grabbed the foot Chuaning instinctively tried to pull back. Moran, down on one knee, looked up with eyes that were not going to take no for an answer. I'll go after I give Shizun a foot rub. This man has just suddenly turned into a service top, and I don't think Chuaning is gonna know what to make of it. I barely know what to make of it. Okay. Oh my word! Why did they decide to draw this? Okay, let me just show it to you guys now so you know what we're working with when I read what I'm about to read, whatever it is. Just look at that and tell me that the artist didn't have way too much fun drawing that. Chuaning deeply wants to kick him. Maybe then he would get the hell out instead of saying whatever the hell he wanted in his presence. But the hand gripped him so strongly. But the hand gripping him was so strong and calloused. The rough skin on the pads of Moran's fingers and between his thumb and forefinger rubbed against Chuaning's foot, where the skin was extra ticklish from soaking in the hot water. He was so busy trying not to laugh that he missed his last opportunity to save his dignity and boot Moran out. Kneeling on the floor, Moran brought Chuaning's foot up to his knee and began to massage it gently and carefully, eyes downcast in concentration. Shizun. Was it cold in the paddy field? It was all right. There were tons of dead branches and debris in there. Look, you got scratches on the side here. Chuaning looked at the side of his right foot. Sure enough, there was a small cut. It's just a scratch. I can hardly feel it. Moran said instead. I packed some herbal ointment for such things. Wait here a moment, Shizun. I'll go grab it and put it on for you. Auntie made it so it's really good. It'll heal up by morning. So saying, he stepped out the door towards his room, which was opposite Chuaning's across a small courtyard only a dozen steps wide. In no time he returned with a jar of sweet-smelling ointment. Isn't this an overreaction? Of course not. What if it gets infected? Come here, Shizun. Give me your foot. Chuaning found this awkward. In all his years, he'd kept his feet a private matter. He was always meticulously dressed and never went anywhere barefoot. This was a part of him that scarcely anyone alive had seen, let alone touched. Okay, I don't know how to feel about this development, but okay. Once massaged twice shy, he'd let Moran touch him earlier because he hadn't known what it would feel like. The sore, tender sensation had been fully unexpected and had made him feel all tingly inside. Now he was a little hesitant to yield his foot again. Moran stared at the pair of feet peeking hesitantly from under the robes, pale and white, with a bloom of rosiness from their hot soak. Chuaning's toes were fine and delicate, with nails as translucent as the frozen surface of a lake in winter, and a tender pink blush at the tips. This man is way too intrigued by Chuaning's feet. My goodness. Budding high-tongue blossoms frozen beneath the ice. Moran knelt back down, his expression gentle and reverent as he took this warm high-tongue flower in his hand. He could feel it trembling minutely, petals shivering, and was struck by the sudden urge to dip his head and press a kiss to it, so that it wouldn't hesitate or be afraid, so that it might blossom and unfold. Okay, I'm not commenting. Shizun, what is it? There seemed to be a rawness to Chuaning's voice, like the branches of a flowering tree laden with the weight of desire, blossoms on the verge of giving way, droplets of dew. poised to fall on the parched soil. Moran's head snapped up. The candle flame chose that precise moment to crackle, setting free a burst of sparks as a small stream of wax dripped slowly down. His gaze collided with Chuaning's, and in the glow of the candle, both their eyes were bright with desire, with hunger. "Do you?" Chuaning looked away and said mildly, "Get on with it, my feet are ticklish." I can't believe he actually admitted to being ticklish, so I'm quite surprised. Moran's entire face went red, but fortunately, the splash of colour was concealed by his tan. He mumbled an acknowledgement and lowered his head to apply the ointment, the blush burning all the way to his ears. Couldn't help but hear "get on with it" echo over and over in his head. He swallowed, eyes fixed on the soft skin before him. Images from the past surfaced in his mind, becoming clearer, coming into focus. He remembered the dishevelled bedding in Wushan Palace, the way Chuaning had looked all fairer against those scarlet sheets, the way they had entangled like caged beasts, neck against neck, heavy pants and low groans filling the hall with a ferocious, savage tension. He thought of Chuaning's muted moans, that icy voice melted into flowing water by the flames of desire, then heated into a boil. He could almost hear Chuaning's voice by his ear. "Stop messing around." Oh, I'm sorry, there's like a strong smell of smoke and I don't know why, but it's kind of making my ears tear up a bit. Just give me a second. Moran squeezed his eyes shut, his brow furrowed deep. In this moment, he finally realized something. It wasn't going to be easy for him to treat Chuaning well. If he were to keep his distance, he wouldn't be able to take good care of him or keep him warm. But if he were to stay close, he might not be able to control the flame of desire. He was afraid his rationality might catch fire in a moment of carelessness, that he might do something outrageous. He wanted him, wanted to bed him. Even at this very second, he suddenly thought that he didn't really want to be kneeling in front of Chuaning, giving him foot rubs and applying ointment to his cuts. The person was sitting there in front of him, on the bed, and Moran was just as strong as he had been in the past. Chuaning wouldn't be able to push him off. "No, no, no, don't go down the dark path, come back here." He wanted to take him, wanted to press him down onto that bed. He wanted it so bad his throat felt parched, wanted it so bad it burned and ached. He wanted to kiss and breathe the breath out of Chuaning. He wanted... "All done, Shizun," he said in a near yell, startling Chuaning. Only Moran knew of the cold sweat drenching his own back. All at once, he felt so miserable. Why couldn't he just care for Shizun in a clear, genuine way? Why couldn't he just be rid of this burning desire? Chuaning, Chuaning. His Shizun was the loftiest person in the world. If he were to find out how his own disciple felt towards him, how disdainful would he be? How scornful? It had been 2 lifetimes. Moran no longer wanted to be regarded with scorn by this man. Chuaning pulled his boots back on. The whole time Moran sat to the side with his head lowered wordlessly, looking like a docile, obedient dog. Only he knew of the insatiable wolf he had locked up inside. A long moment passed before Moran managed to suppress the burning in his chest. He said, "Shizun, rest well. If you feel unwell at all tomorrow, then please just stay in. I can do both our shares of work." Before Chuaning could reply, a delicate voice drifted in from outside. I was about to say, aren't we gonna get something about that woman, like, coming to give him whatever? Mo Shinjun? Mo Shinjun? Are you there? I'm curious to see how Chuaning is gonna feel about this. Check something? Okay. Chapter 138. Shizun just might blue ball me to death. What is that title? Oh my goodness. I die. Chuaning directed a mild glance at Moran. Someone's looking for you. Huh? Who could be looking for me at this hour? Moran, whose mind was completely occupied by Chuaning, had long since forgotten whatever had happened during the day with the villagers. It's the young lady who was singing earlier, Chuaning said in a pointedly understated tone. You know, the prettiest girl in the village. Huh? Really? All the girls in the village look more or less the same to me. Chuaning was silent for a moment. I was only gone for 5 years. When did you go blind? But I kind of love that. Moran's just like, but you're here. I mean, I'm not going to be focusing on anyone else. Moran blinked in surprise. Chuaning's tone was unchanged, but when Moran looked up, he caught a hint of a smile in Chuaning's eyes, as if teasing him with good-humoured banter. Pleasantly surprised, Moran felt his mood instantly shift. I'm also pleasantly surprised. Outside, the village girl named Lingar was holding a bundle wrapped in blue cloth with a white floral pattern, hollering as loud as she could at Moran's door. More Shinjun, more. I'm over here. Lingar turned at the sound of a man's deep voice behind her, only to see Moran leaning in the doorway, lifting one side of the curtain and smiling at her. It's already so late. Did you need something? Lingar was momentarily startled, but her shock quickly melted into delight. Happily, she went to him. Good thing Shinjun hasn't gone to bed yet. Here, this is for you. I got it from my auntie, like I mentioned during lunch earlier. But please use it. She pushed the cloth bag she was carrying into his arms as she spoke. Moran opened the bag and found 3 little clay jars. What are these? Medicinal salve. Lingar explained brightly, pointing at her own cheeks with a smile. For your mosquito bite in the field earlier. Ah, Moran finally remembered what this was about. He found himself a little abashed that the girl had so wholeheartedly believed his offhanded excuse and come all this way to give him the salve. I think she came to sleep with you, but okay, sure. The villagers here were rather too gullible. You must have not gotten bit too badly, though. Lingar raised herself up on tippy toes and gave Moran's face a careful once-over, smiling even more sunnily. I don't even see a bump. Moran cleared his throat. I am a cultivator, after all. Lingar clapped her hands with a laugh. You cultivators are so interesting. If I had the talent for it, I'd want to become one too. Too bad it's not in the stars for me. They chatted a bit longer until Moran thanked her and ducked back inside with the salve. Chuaning had moved to the table and was flipping idly through the book Moran had abandoned. He looked up when he heard Moran come in. Medicinal salve, Moran explained bashfully. Did you really get bit? Come here, let me see. Oh, cute. Okay, guys, I'm really sorry to do this. I know we're only half an hour into the reading, and I don't usually do this, but the smoke smells so strongly. I just need to see if I can close some windows or something, because I don't know where it's coming from. So I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. Hopefully, this is gonna help a little bit. Because, damn, that was just a lot. Okay. Under the candlelight, Moran's skin was a deep ember of honey candy, accentuating his dashing features. Chuaning stared for a while before asking, "So, where's the bite?" Moran scratched his head, embarrassed. "It went down already. My skin's thick." He set all 3 jars of the refreshing medicinal salve on Chuaning's table as he spoke. "I don't need these. Shizun should hang on to them instead, since you're more likely to get bug bites." Chuaning neither accepted nor declined. First the herbal ointment and now the medicinal salve. I'll have to open an apothecary at this rate. Moran only rubbed at his handsome nose and beamed, quiet and sincere. Chuaning reached out and poked at his forehead. "It's getting late. Go back to your room and go to sleep." Sleep well, Shizun. Sleep well." But that night, in those 2 rundown straw huts separated by a small courtyard the width of 10 steps, neither of the 2 found sleep. Despite their exchanged wishes, both tossed and turned restlessly. Chuaning could still feel the tingling in his feet, could practically still feel Moran's calloused fingers rubbing against his skin. Moran's thoughts were rather more complicated. He shifted this way and that, head pillowed on his arm, while he tapped fitfully at the seam between the bedboards, repeating over and over in his head, "Shizun is a god, an immortal, an otherworldly being. No matter what happened in the past life, I definitely won't do anything stupid in this one. I definitely won't bully him, definitely won't mess things up again." Oh goodness, this is a long road ahead. And besides, there was still Shimei. Yes, he should think more about Shimei instead. Shimei. He suddenly felt doubly uneasy. The fact was, since returning to Session Peak and reuniting with Shimei, Moran had found himself feeling rather lukewarm towards him. To him, liking Shimei and protecting Shimei had settled into a kind of habit, a thing that he constantly did. But to what end? He still felt fond of the Shimei of 5 years ago, but the beautiful man of today was like a stranger to him. This new unfamiliarity left him at a loss. He didn't know what was wrong with him, or what he ought to do about it. Chuaning woke up early the next morning. When he stepped outside, he came face to face with Moran, who was lifting the curtain of his own room. "Good morning, Shizun," Moran said. "Morning." Chuaning glanced at him. "Didn't sleep well?" Moran summoned up a smile. "I'm not really used to the bed. It's all right. I'll just take a nap later." They set off towards the fields together, the early morning breeze bringing the refreshing fragrance of grass and trees. It was quiet on their walk over, the silence broken only by the occasional singing of frogs and chirping of cicadas. Chuaning yawned languidly, then caught something out of the corner of his eye that made him smile. "Moran?" Chuaning reached over to brush through Moran's bangs and plucked a piece of straw from his hair. He said with a small smile, "What are you doing? Rolling around the bed? You've got straw in your hair." I love seeing the softer side of Chuaning in his true form, because obviously we did see a little bit of it in his form as Shasani, but this is different. Moran was about to defend himself when he spotted a piece of straw on the side of Chuaning's head as well. He also smiled and said, "Then Shizun must have been rolling around too," and picked the golden straw off Chuaning's hair. As the sun crested the eastern horizon, master and disciple gazed at each other against a backdrop of resplendent gold. one with his head slightly lowered, the other with his head slightly tipped up. Not the romantic scene, oh my goodness. Just the way they had in the past, except that 5 years ago, the one looking down had been Chuaning, and the one gazing up had been Moran. But the years had flown by, and Morway was no longer a youth. In this moment, it was as if time was finally willing to slow down. In the light of the gentle dawn, Moran jumped into the paddy field on impulse, opening his arms and smiling at the man standing on the raised ridge. Shizun, jump! I'll catch you. Oh, goodness. Chuaning eyed the drop from the ridge to the field. It was only waist high. Is something wrong with your head? Ha! He took off his shoes and gracefully hopped down into the paddy field himself, sending a ripple through the water and a chill up through the bottoms of his feet. With a grand sweep of one broad sleeve, an air of imposing dignity, Chuaning claimed a large stretch of the field for himself. This whole area is mine. I didn't cut as much as you yesterday, but today I fully intend to beat you. Moran's outstretched arms went instead to scratch his head. The corners of his lips quirked up, and an especially charming smile spread across his face. Okay, if I lose, I'll make Shizun lots and lots of Lotus Crisp and lots of stewed crab meatballs, and lots of honey glazed sweet lotus root too. Chuaning added, "Oh, he's getting demanding. I love that. Okay." Sure thing. But what if Shizun loses? Moran's eyes were clear and bright, like they enclosed the entire starry sky. Then what? Chuaning shot him a cool, sidelong glance. What do you want? Moran mulled it over for some time, chewing on his bottom lip. Finally, he said, "If Shizun loses, Shizun will have to eat all the Lotus Crisps and stewed crab meatballs I make." A pause, and then, in an even, gentler tone, carried on the refreshing breeze, "and all the honey-glazed sweet lotus fruit too." Guys, he is so soft for Chuaning. I can't deal. Win or lose, I just want an excuse to treat you well. I can't deal with this. This is making me too happy. This is what we deserve after all the hell that we've been put through in the past few volumes. I'm just scared about when it's gonna end. So cute, yes it is. They're adorable. Okay. In this short interval, Chuaning had gone quite adept at harvesting rice, and he did not like to lose. It was enough that he had been laughed at yesterday. He was not going to be the butt of jokes today too. Huffily thinking thus, he worked with a singular diligence, slicing away at the stalks, and by midday he'd cut down a good deal more than Moran. He felt rather proud of himself as they took their lunch under the mulberry tree. He didn't say it, nor did he show it on his face, but his eyes kept wandering over to the side of the paddy field where the rice he'd harvested was stacked into the formidable little mountain of gold. Everyone sat together to eat. Moran ate without pause, and his bowl was clean in no time. Noticing his empty bowl, the auntie was quick to speak up. "Lingar, go get Shenjun another helping of rice." But Moran set down his bowl and chopsticks like he was in a hurry. He flashed a smile and said, "That's all right, I'm done. I have something to take care of, so I'm going to run off for a bit. It might take a while, so go ahead and finish eating without me." I'm very scared, and I know that I'm being too paranoid, but I'm so scared that Lingar is going to get it in her head to like feed him an aphrodisiac via food or something like that, and then it's going to be a whole mess. Because everything's just going too well right now. I think that's my reason for being fearful. It might take a while, so go ahead and finish eating without me. Lingara was taken by surprise, which turned into unease. Does Shinjin really eat so little? Is the food not to your taste? If you don't like it, I could go make something else for you. No, that's not it. The food's great. Of course, Moran was completely oblivious to the overtones of the girl's offer. He brushed her off with a forthright grin and took off towards the stable with large strides. Where are you going? Chuaning asked. Moran looked back over his shoulder and smiled. Just a little shopping. I'll be right back. I was about to say, is he gonna go get him a bed? Shinjin, it's fine. Let him be. Chuaning said mildly as he closed his chopsticks around another piece of fried tofu. Although the two cultivators had arrived together, anyone with eyes could see who had the higher status and who the lower, and whose words counted. Moreover, Chuaning's naturally cold and severe features made it difficult for villagers to press the matter once he'd spoken. They could only let Moran go. After lunch, everyone split into small groups, some passing the time by chewing tobacco, some napping in the sunshine. The women sat together knitting winter clothes, while the children played, riding on bamboo stick horses. A rail-thin cat sniffed hopefully at the ground, its little pink nose twitching and ears perked, looking for leftovers to eat. Chuaning was resting against a pile of grain with a cup of warm tea when he saw the pitiful skinny cat. I know they're not going to adopt the cat, but that's where my brain went. He raised a hand to entice it over, thinking to find something to eat, but the cat was wary of strangers. It thought that Chuaning had raised his hand to hit it and fled immediately. Chuaning stared after it mutely. Did he really look so scary? Even cats didn't like him. As he sulked with a cheek in hand, he heard the jingling of copper pieces. Lingar came over cheerfully, also holding a cup of tea, and sat down beside Chuaning. He turned to look at her with an impassive expression. This girl was pretty, and on top of that, she wasn't skinny or frail, the kind of full-figured woman rarely found in such remote and desolate places. She knew how to dress herself, too. She hadn't any money to buy accessories, so she'd gathered some bits of copper and iron, then cleaned them and ground them into smooth rings to string along the hem of her clothing, so that she'd jingled as she walked and gleamed under the sun. Shenjun, she called, with a voice that was crisp as a ripened berry. What is it? Chuaning's voice was cool and clear as drifting mist. Lingar was a bit taken aback by his standoffishness, but she quickly put on a smile as if he'd been perfectly amicable and said, Nothing. I just saw you sitting by yourself and thought I'd come over and keep you company. Chuaning eyed her. He knew he didn't have a friendly-looking face. Not even a cat wanted to get close to him. Yet people and cats were different after all. Cats had no schemes, but people might have ulterior motives. That is unfortunately true. Sure enough, after a cascade of chatter full of empty pleasantries and trifling nonsense, Lingar threw out her real question casually. Shinjin, what does it take to become a disciple at Sersheng Peak? Do you think I have a chance? Give me your hand, said Chuaning. Ah? Her eyes widened, and she excitedly did as she was told. Chuaning pressed the tips of his fingers lightly against the inside of her wrist. After a moment he drew back. You do not. Lingara's face instantly flushed red. Do I not have the aptitude? You knew I was going to check your core as soon as I asked for your hand, so you must have already had someone check for you in the past, Chuaning said. You don't have that aptitude for cultivation. and you will likely be unable to build the foundation for it even if you spend your whole life trying. It would only be a waste of time were you to go to the peak. I'd suggest forgetting about it. Lingar fell silent, and her head drooped, crestfallen. A long while passed before she bit her lip and said in a small voice, "Thank you for the advice." "You're welcome." Why do I feel suddenly weary of this person? She left quietly. Watching her go, Chuaning felt a little conflicted. The common folk of the lower cultivation realm hoped more fervently to join a cultivation sect than those of the upper realm. To the people of the upper cultivation realm, cultivation was a means of bringing honor to one's ancestors and making a name for oneself. But to people of the lower cultivation realm, acceptance into a sect was sometimes a mean of survival. Leaning back against the pile of grain, Chuaning took another sip of his tea. The weather really was getting cooler. The tea had gone cold in the few short moments he'd left it alone. He gulped the rest down and closed his eyes, thinking to rest for a bit. But with how poorly he'd slept last night, together with all the strenuous labor of the morning, he ended up falling dead asleep. When he woke again, the sky was already a deep red, and crows were cawing in the branches. All that was left between the paddy fields were sheaves of rice neatly arranged and scattered pieces of grain. Chuaning's eyes snapped wide open in startlement. To think he had slept all the way to sundown, propped against a pile of grain like this. The farmers probably hadn't had the guts to wake him on account of his status. Not only had they let him sleep the day away, someone had even covered him with an article of clothing so he wouldn't catch a cold. For me, like the moment he said he slept the day away, I was like, oh frick, please tell me he didn't like get a lot of sunburn, because that is what usually happens to me. His clothing. He was about to sit up when he recognized the familiar scent. Coming fully awake, he looked down at the cloth covering him. The fabric was coarse but very clean, with the refreshing scent of the soap beans used in its laundering still clinging to its seams. It was Moran's clothing. Upon realizing this, Chuaning found himself hastily slumping back down. The muscles in his back relaxed as he hid half his face under the clothing. Sorry, I don't know why I struggled so much with that sentence. Only a pair of bright eyes were left showing, slightly narrowed, holding some kind of indiscernible and indecipherable emotion within. He really must have lost his mind. Squinting, he scanned the paddy fields for the man he sought. It didn't take long. Moran had grown so handsomely tall that he stood out effortlessly wherever he went. From where he sat, Chuaning could see only his back as he helped the villagers load the sheaves of grain onto an ox cart. Moran was probably hot from having worked all day and had stripped out of his outer robes and shirt like the other villagers, leaving his rugged, honey-toned back in full view. "Excuse you?" In the searing heat of the sinking sun, sweat slid slowly down the lines of his broad back with every flex of his muscles, trickling to the dimples of his back, snaking beneath the toned lines of his waist. Chuaning was like red-hot iron, like a coal in a furnace, taking every tender sentiment and turning it into a burning carnal desire. As he studied Moran from a distance, everything else faded out of his consciousness, leaving only that person's gorgeous body, the flex of his muscles as sleek as a panther's, his profile whenever he turned to chat with the village chief, with its soft dimple and kind gaze, were flowing with handsome charm. The compliments for Moran just keep coming. Wow. As if he'd sensed the eyes on his back, Moran turned to look over his shoulder. Chuaning hurriedly shut his eyes and pretended to be asleep, but his heart beat so fast it sounded like a rainstorm, and the blood racing through his veins was a low rumble in his ears. Several seconds passed before he sneakily cracked open one eyelid and peeked out from under his lashes. Moran had already turned back around, and Lingar was walking up to him with a bashful gaze and a handkerchief in her hand. Shizun, here, wipe your sweat. Moran, whose arms were filled with the rice he was moving onto the cart, smiled and said, "Later, I'm busy right now." Lingar seemed more than happy to stay and watch, reaching out now and again to help straighten the pile so it didn't fall. A bit surprised at her eagerness, Moran said, "Thank you." Thus she grew even more delighted, standing next to this tall, powerful man who practically radiated masculine allure. As she listened to his breathing and looked at his muscular shoulders, she couldn't help the blush that spread across her face. For a moment, she forgot all about things like distance and propriety between men and women. She clutched her handkerchief and said in a soft voice, "Shenzhen, it's gonna drip into your eyes if you don't wipe it." Moran stayed busy. "I don't have free hands right now." "Then I can wipe it for you." She felt a chill at her back before she'd finished speaking. Without either of them noticing, Chuaning had come over to stand behind them. Still wearing Moran's thick black outer robe draped over his shoulders. He looked listless and irritable, like he had just woken up. "Moran?" "Yes?" The man who'd been so busy he had no time to even wipe his sweat immediately set down the grain in his arms and rubbed the tip of his nose as he turned, beaming brightly at the sight of Chuaning. "Shizun, you're awake." This man is so head over heels. Chuaning looked him up and down. "Aren't you cold?" Moran smiled. "I'm kind of hot, actually." Just then, the droplet of sweat that had been gathering at his dark brow dripped into his eyes. He squeezed it shut with a "Aya," but the other eye stayed stubbornly open to gaze upon his Shizun. Of course, he couldn't just ask the lady for her handkerchief, so he pleaded with Chuaning and said, "Shizun, my handkerchief's hanging out to dry right now." Lingar hurriedly offered, "You can use mine." Paying her no heed, Chuaning stepped forward, features impassive even as he leaned forward and tipped his head back to look up. He held the cuff of his snowy white sleeve closed as he raised his arm and used it to carefully wipe the sweat from Moran's brow. Oh my goodness. He really said, "I don't have my handkerchief with me, but I'll be damned if anyone else wipes your sweat." My goodness. Okay, we are taking a quick 10-minute break. I know that I already kind of took a little break, but I do need to just get up, stretch my legs, and get something new to drink. So we'll be back at 12 past. Okay, I'm back. I got my mom to watch King the Land, and then she was like asking me questions, and I'm like, I have to go. Anyway, sorry about that. Okay, we're back. I have more tea, and I am ready. Chapter 139. Yeah, sorry. Chapter 139. Shizun Sweet Dreams. Moran froze. He could smell the familiar fragrance of high tongue, and though Chuaning wore a straight face, the sleeve on his eyelid was gentle and careful as it wiped. But more importantly, this white-robed person was standing so close that Moran could see the fine lines in the texture of his lips. So close that all he had to do was dip his head down to kiss those lips, to take those tender petals between his own. So is the rest of this book just gonna be Moran's mind being in the gutter? Cause like, I mean, I'm not saying I would complain. You may have won, but you didn't wake me up, so it wasn't a fair match, Chuaning said as he finished wiping. Moran blinked, then smiled. But I didn't win. Shizun won. You didn't harvest anything more all afternoon? Nope. And there's not much left either. I went to the market, bought some things for the winter, and made a round throughout the village. That took up some time, Moran said. So Shizun reaped more than I did. He is thirsting hard, he is indeed. Chuaning let out a cool but seemed satisfied. After a moment he asked, What did you buy at the market? Mattresses? Before Moran could reply, Lingar, not wishing to be left out, cut in with a smile. Shenjun bought so much stuff, I felt bad for the poor horse that had to drag it all back. Oh my goodness. Moran is not going to have any money left if he keeps on spending this way. It wasn't that much, just coal and such, some meat and some sweets. Not only that, Lingar said, Shenjun also went and bought a mattress for every family in the village. Oh, okay, that is the best. That's, oh goodness, okay. Mm. It was so many that the grandma who fluffs the cotton just up and came back to the village with him with her whole cart full. Chuaning was a bit astonished. Where did you get the money? I have some savings, Moran said with a smile, and the mattresses were pretty reasonable too, much cheaper than the ones they sell in the upper cultivation realm. What's the meat for? Impulse purchase. I gave it to the village chief to roast and share with everyone tomorrow. Chuaning's face remained carefully neutral as he asked, And the sweets? I love how that's his concern, not whether or not he's getting a mattress or whether or not the meat's for him. The sweets are the important thing. Lingara clapped her hands with a giggle. For the kids in the village, of course. Mo Xianjun gave out the sweets first thing when he got back. There was malt sugar candy and osmosis cake. The kids were over the moon. Not many of them have had treats like that before. This is so sweet. Oh my goodness. She paused, then said happily, I got one too. The girl was sociable and acted familiar with everyone. Chuaning hadn't minded the other time she interjected, but this time he shot her a cold glare. Was it good? Lingar answered freely, Super good, very sweet. A sardonic smile tugged at Chuaning's lips. And help yourselves to more, he said indifferently before walking away with a sweep of his sleeves. Moran didn't know what he'd done to upset him this time. He was about to give chase when something black blotted out his entire field of vision. Chuaning had tossed the robe he draped across his shoulders at Moran's face. Oh, goodness. Moran pulled it off and looked anxiously back at him. Shizun, what are you doing naked like that? I'm freezing just looking at you. Chuaning snapped. Put on your clothes. Moran was rendered speechless. He truly was quite warm, but he quickly and silently pulled the robe on anyway, since Chuaning had said so. The fabric was instantly soaked with sweat and stuck uncomfortably to his skin. At a loss, he gazed at his Shizun through downcast lashes. Chuaning lowered his sharp brows. Fix your collar. Don't leave it open for the world to see. Indecent. Mutely, Moran pulled his lapels closed, folding them tight and high, so that not a slither of skin was left exposed. Yet all that did was impart him with a kind of untouchable allure instead. Whereas Chuaning is like desperately trying to make Moran less appealing to himself and clearly not succeeding. For some reason, the sight of it made Chuaning even angrier. He cursed under his breath and walked away with a flick of his sleeves, leaving Moran to stare blankly after him like a dumb dog. The village chief, his wife, and Lingar were all flummoxed as they watched this exchange. Lingar said, somewhat disconcerted, "This Shenzhen sure is scary. I've never seen such a strange-tempered person before." She spoke quietly in sympathetic, fawning tones, turning her head as she muttered, "Your master's so mean to you. You're really patient, putting up with all that." "Oh, yeah, no, you don't talk ill of Chuaning." The words died on her lips as her eyes met Moran's, but usually smiling and easygoing Mo Xianjun wore a dark expression, and there was a terrifying wolf-like ferocity in his eyes. Her mouth snapped shut, and Moran turned his face away, somewhat obscuring his features. Lingar could feel her heart race. She was unsure if it was merely her imagination, or if this person, who was usually so calm and serene, like a sturdy mountain, really had revealed a starkly different face of savagery for an instant. "Sorry," Moran mumbled. "You guys go ahead first. I'm going to go check on him." He set off with broad strides. Moran found Chuaning by the bank of the river, where reeds danced along the shore and the setting sun sunk into rippling waters. Moran came to a stop behind him, a little short of breath from how fast he'd run. "Shizun?" No reply. "Did I do something wrong?" "No." "Then why are you so displeased?" "I'm plenty pleased." Moran blinked. "Huh?" Turning to look over his shoulder, Chuaning said grouchily, "I'll be as displeased as I please." Oh my word, he's being so difficult. Oh. His mom would be proud of him. Yeah. Oh goodness, I just like that was a really nice moment though, showing how much Moran has come to like care and focus on caring for others, because I feel like that's the very essence of Chuaning. So it does feel like he's aspiring to be a better person. Moran blinked. "Huh?" Turning to look over his shoulder, Chuaning said gruffly, "I'll be as displeased as I please." Moran didn't want to play word games with Chuaning. He studied his expression instead, then smiled as realization dawned. "I know why Shizun is upset." Chuaning's hands balled into fists within his billowing sleeves, and though he maintained a calm expression, his shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. "I already said I'm not." But Moran had walked over to stand under the tree with him, grinning with a hand behind his back. The old banyan tree at the riverbank had thick roots protruding above ground, like hardy veins that burrowed deep into the earth. Standing on one of these roots, Moran looked even taller than he already was. Alarmed and a touch annoyed, Chuaning said, "Get down here." "All righty." Moran hopped lightly down and landed in front of Chuaning. The tree was so massive and sprawling that there was very little space not occupied by its roots. Chuaning stood in one such spot, and Moran had little other ground to stand on besides the patch right next to him. As he waited with his head lowered, Moran's breaths were practically caressing Chuaning's lashes. Chuaning was so uncomfortable, he ended up demanding with a gloomy expression, "Go stand up there again." Oh my goodness, he's so taciturn. Moran couldn't help but grin. Up and down, up and down. Is Shizun toying with me? Chuaning knew he was being unreasonable in his irritation. Thus exposed, he simply refused to reply, remaining grimly silent. Moran revealed the hand he'd hidden behind his back. It held a surprise cargo of candy, a colourful little pile of rice paper wrapped sweetness cupped in his palm. "Don't be mad. I saved some for you." Chuaning only grew more silently furious. He was so mad he could spit blood, flames of rage burning high into the heavens. Sword-like brows drawn low in anger, he eventually bellowed, "More way here." Moran hurriedly snapped to attention. "Present!" "Who wants your stupid candy? What am I, a 3-year-old? Some village maiden? I don't want A piece of candy had been stuffed into his mouth. Wow, the bravery that Moran is displaying at the moment. I am kind of shocked. Chuaning froze in shock. His face flushed bright red all the way to the tips of his ears. Whether in anger or embarrassment, what was anyone's guess, and his phoenix eyes were as wide as they could go as he glared at the grinning man before him with a mixture of shock and fury. "It's milk-flavored," Moran said. "Your favorite." Chuaning found himself a little speechless, a little powerless, like a cat with its claws clipped, hissing and bristling, yet completely harmless. He savoured the milk candy. A small strand of hair by his temple, loosened when he stomped off earlier, fluttered softly like a tender leaf in the breeze. Staring at it, are we really about to get him tucking Chuaning's hair behind his ear? Staring at it, Moran had an irresistible urge to reach out and tuck it back in. Moran was a man of action, he thought, so he did. Chuaning's speechlessness intensified. I got some candies and pastries for everyone in the village," Moran said with a smile, "but I tucked the best candies in my sleeve for Shizun, and I left the best pastries in your room. I got you Lotus Crisps, really pretty ones. Eat them in secret when you get back. Don't let the little ones see, or they'll want some too." Chuaning said nothing, standing in the field of reeds beneath the banyan tree. A long moment passed before he rolled the melting milk candy on his tongue and gazed up at the person standing before him. Finally, he tossed out the words, "Honey-glazed lotus root." Moran grinned. "Yep." "Stewed carrot meatballs?" "Yep." Chuaning silently turned his head away. He felt like he had discarded a little too much of his dignity today, and he should pick it back up and dust it off. So he pointedly straightened his spine and lifted his chin slightly as he said, "Too bad there isn't any pear blossom white wine." He must have thought he looked very stern and imposing that way, and it might have had such an effect in the past when Moran had been younger and shorter than him. Little did he know that the posture now served only to give Moran a better view of his gently sloping jawline, his exposed throat, and his porcelain fair neck. He was like an arrogant cat, flaunting its softest spot in front of a wolf's fangs, conceited and oblivious, thinking it was intimidating the wolf, when in truth the wolf wanted nothing more than to take the cat's throat between its jaws, to lick it and to kiss it, to eat him whole. What a dummy. My goodness, okay. It took an enormous amount of willpower for Moran to tear his gaze from the underside of Chuaning's jaw, but his eyes were a little darker and his voice a bit deeper as he looked at the person in front of him. He forced himself to smile, conducted himself in the way a man of integrity would, and said, "I got that too." Chuaning didn't quite follow at first and asked with a furrowed brow, "What?" "Pear blossom white." Keeping his expression carefully steady, Moran exhaled quietly as he squashed that burning desire inside of himself. His voice came out a little rough. "I got pear blossom white too." Chuaning stared in silence. "It occurred to me on the way back that Shizun might want it," Moran explained. "Good thing I picked some up." Chuaning glared at the disciple who had pulled out all the stops to please him and found himself at a loss for words. Perhaps, he suddenly thought, there was really no point in being so difficult, no point to this veneer of coldness. He finally relaxed by degrees, leaning against the old banyan tree as he studied the young man before him. "Moran? You've changed." "You've noticed! I'm so happy you've noticed." Sorry, that was me, that was not Moran. For a split second, he thought he caught a hint of unease in the depths of Moran's eyes. But then Moran's thick eyelashes fluttered, and he asked, "Does Shizun like it?" Chuaning eyed him for a long moment. "I don't dislike it." Then, as if remembering something, he straightened up and raised a hand that hesitated mid-air for a beat before coming to rest on Moran's side. Moran flinched, looking down at Chuaning in apprehensive confusion. "I read about your battle with the drought demon of Yellow River," Chuaning said. "Is this where you were injured?" A long pause, then, Chuaning sighed softly and clapped Moran on the shoulder. "You've done well. The title of Mo Zongshi is well deserved." This disciple wouldn't presume. A small smile tugged at Chuaning's lips, and he poked Moran between the brows with that same hand. Then again, running around half naked all day is indeed no way for a Zongshi to behave. "It's getting late. Let's head back and turn in for the night. What's the plan for tomorrow?" Moran thought for a second before saying, "I think there was something about cooking the rice to make rice cakes." Chuaning nodded. He suddenly said, "Don't just randomly take off your clothes anymore." Moran's face went red. "Got it. Take a breath if you're hot from working." "Okay." Chuaning moved it over a bit more, then added, "Remember to bring your own handkerchief and don't dally around with unmarried girls." "Do you have a handkerchief?" Okay, I know I said I don't necessarily think Moran was right in the idea of Chuaning having embroidered his own handkerchief, but if he did, can he please make one for Moran? Can that be a thing that happens? Am I asking for too much? Probably. Feeling a little self-conscious, Moran replied, "Nope." "Then what do you use to wipe your face?" Feeling even more abashed over his own crudeness, Moran hesitated before eventually saying, "My sleeves." Chuaning stared at him for a moment. "I'll make you one sometime." Moran's eyes brightened. "For me?" Moran was ecstatic. "I can't wait. When is Shizun going to make it?" Chuaning's brows drew together slightly. "After we're done here, at the very least. Then, I want one with a high-tone flowers too. Is that okay?" Chuaning eyed him, then said, "I'll see what I can do." He wants a matching pair with Chuaning. Oh my goodness, this man is such a sap. I love it. Overcome with joy over the promised handkerchief he'd earned in exchange for a handful of candy, Moran floated on cloud 9 all night, rolling around in his newly bought quilt, too happy to sleep. He had spent these last 5 years in a fog of agonizing misery. This was the first time he couldn't sleep because of joy instead. His heart kept racing and wouldn't calm down. In the end, he gave in and sat up. His window was right across from Chuaning's. He opened it a crack and leaned on the sill, taking in a refreshing scent of night in the courtyard as he gazed into the small courtyard and at the candlelight across the way. Chuaning was still up. What was he doing? Was he considering designs for the handkerchief, or was he eating the lotus crisps? I love that he's now like, yes, that must be what he's doing. He's doing something related to me, whether it's the lotus crisps or the handkerchief. Moran watched that warm yellow light in the room across from his for a long, long time, all the way until the light was snuffed out, and Chuaning went to bed, before wistfully murmuring, Shizun, sweet dreams. And something else kept tucked away deep inside, something he dared not speak aloud even if no one could hear. Wanning, sweet dreams. I'm not okay. This is so good. I'm very scared about the other shoe dropping at some point. Okay, we are on chapter 140, Shizun, turnover. Okay. Thanks to Moran's well wishes, Chuaning did indeed dream that night. Unfortunately, it wasn't the sweet kind. In his dream, he was back at Butterfly Town during the Heavenly Rift. However, the person mending the great tear in the sky with him wasn't Moran but Shimei. Oh, he's dreaming about the first lifetime's version of this. Working amidst heavy snow falling from an ashen sky, Shimei couldn't hold out. A horde of ghosts stabbed him through the heart, and he fell from the coiled dragon pillar to the endless snowy ground below. Moran rushed out over to gather the bleeding Shimei into his arms. He knelt at Chuaning's feet and begged him to help, to save his own disciple. Chuaning wanted to save him too, but under the effect of the twinned barrier, he had suffered the same grave injury as the Shimei. Face drained of all colour, he stood there wordlessly for fear that blood would come spilling out were he to part his lips, and that the teeming ghosts would rush them at once to tear them to pieces. Shizun, please, I'm begging you. Moran was weeping and kowtowing to him over and over. Chuaning closed his eyes and fled. Shimei died. Moran never forgave him. He dreamt of an READALONG bridge at Shizun Peak during a cold spell in that late spring. It was raining, drops clinging to the tender beginnings of flowering leaves on the trees, and the blue stone path beneath his feet seemed endless as he walked its length, holding an umbrella. In the distance, across the bridge, he saw another figure walking towards him, dressed in black with no umbrella, holding a stack of books wrapped in oil paper. Chuaning unconsciously slowed his pace. That person had clearly noticed him as well, but his steps didn't slow. He only lifted those rain-laden lashes to cast him a single cold glance. Chuaning wanted to call out to him, wanted to say more, but Moran didn't allow him the chance to speak. Clutching his books, he walked as far to the left as he could without falling into the river, in order to get as far away as he could from his Shizun on the right. They met in the middle of the bridge. One who usually used an umbrella, walking in the rain, the one who never had the habit of using one. also in the rain. They passed each other by. Okay, I'm so glad we're not actually experiencing this again. The one enduring the rain kept walking without so much as a backward glance, but the one under the shelter of the umbrella stopped, standing rooted in place. Rain pattered against the oiled paper. Chuaning stood there for a long time, so long his legs began to go numb, as if the damp cold of the Sichuan air had sunk into his very bones. He suddenly felt an exhaustion so crushing he couldn't take another step. The dream was swallowed by black. It was cold and heavy, cold like the rain, heavy like legs that refused to move. Chuaning turned over in his sleep and crawled into a tiny ball. Wetness slid from the corner of his eye and soaked into the pillow. He vaguely knew that it was only a dream, but why, then, was it so realistic? So much so that he could clearly feel Moran's hatred, his disappointment, his sperm. Was that it? Was that how it ended? He refused to accept it. Perhaps it was this refusal that made the dreamscape light up again. He was back in the same dream, many months after Shumei's passing. Moran's temperament grew gloomier by the day, and he spoke less and less. He still came to his cultivation lessons, but only to sit in and listen, and he never spoke a word more to Chuaning than he had to. Chuaning had never explained why he hadn't saved Mingjing back then. Seeing Moran's attitude, he knew nothing he said would change things now that they had come to this point. One day, during cultivation lesson, Moran stood at the tip of the pine tree as instructed, working on concentrating spiritual energy. But for some reason, he collapsed without warning and plummeted right off the tree. Chuaning flew up to catch him without thought, but he didn't have time to cast anything, and the two fell heavily to the ground below. Luckily, the soil was soft and covered with a thick layer of pine needles. Neither of them was much injured, save for Chuaning's wrist, which had been slashed open by a sharp branch and was seeping blood. Moran looked at the wound and then, for the first time in months, lifted his eyes to look directly at Chuaning's face. He said eventually, "Shizun, you're bleeding." His tone was a little stiff, but at least the words were pacifying. "There are salves and bandages in my chin kun pouch. Best to take care of it straight away." They sat on the thick cushion of needles and refreshing scent of pine drifting in the air. Chuaning said nothing as he watched Moran wordlessly wrap the bandages around his wrist with his head bowed. Though he couldn't see the expression on Moran's face, he could see the minute quivering of his lashes. For a moment he wished he could gather up the courage to ask, "Moran, do you really hate me that much?" But the breeze was so gentle, the sunlight so warm, birds and bugs chirping between the branches, and his injured hand was held lightly between Moran's as he wrapped the bandage. Everything was so quiet and peaceful. Why do I feel like at this point Moran was plotting something? In the end, he didn't ask, didn't shatter the picture of serenity. He suddenly felt like the answer wasn't that important anyway. What was important was this dream after Shumei's death. In this dream after Shumei's death was that his blood, his injury, could buy back just a wisp of Moran's rationality, could ease the tension between them just a touch. This is sad. Oh, goodness. Okay. Chuaning woke up dazed the next day. Lying in bed, he could still feel the lingering warmth and the ache in his wrist. Some minutes passed before he rubbed his face in exhaustion. Ridiculous. What was that nonsense in his dream? It was said that dreams were a manifestation of one's private thoughts. Could it be that he was so moved by how beautiful Shumei had grown that he had to vent these emotions in a dream about Shimei's death? How absurd. He rose from his bed and got ready for the day, washing, dressing, and putting up his hair. Soon enough, he'd forgotten all about the night's fragmented visions. The villagers were making ice cakes. Sorry, not ice cakes, rice cakes. Ice cakes would be an interesting thing to behold. The way of thinking was really sad. Yeah. And it's interesting how he immediately blames himself. And I mean, I think it's kind of fair to not just assume, oh, this is my past life coming back to haunt me. But it is interesting how he immediately internalizes it and thinks, oh, I must wish ill will onto Shimei. Something must be wrong with me. I don't know if you guys just heard that, but that was my dog giving a very strange bark. Sorry about that. In the lower cultivation realm, rice cakes were an absolute must for New Year's Eve, believed to bring good fortune in the next year. Both short grain, non gelatinous rice and gelatinous rice that had been ground into flour the night before were steamed by the women and elders over hot stoves. It was a laborious process, but didn't require the aid of younger men folk, so Chuaning slept in a little and took his time strolling over. When he arrived, he saw a giant wok propped over a fire in an open field with a wooden barrel half as tall as the man sat over it, billowing with hot steam. The village chief's wife stood on a footstool, adding rice flour to the barrel every now and again. A couple of kids ran around the wok, playing and occasionally pulling a fistful of roasted peanuts or a corn cob from the fire pit using metal tongs. What Chuaning hadn't expected was that Moran had gotten up early as usual and was helping the village chief's wife tend to the stove. One of the kids, running a bit too fast, tripped, sniffled, and burst into tears. Moran helped her up and patted the dust off her clothes, asking, "Oh no, you tripped? Are you hurt anywhere?" He's so soft in these moments, oh my goodness. My hand, the little girl, still boiling, lifted her dirty little palm to show Moran. Moran scooped her up, walking over to the well, and drew a bucket of clean water to wash her hand with. From a distance, Chuaning couldn't hear what he said to the child, but the little girl choked back her tears, sniffled for a while, then stopped crying. In due time, she smiled, then looked up at Moran, with snot smeared over her little face, and began chattering away at him. Chuaning watched quietly from behind a corner as he coaxed the little girl, watched as he carried her back to the fire pit, watched as he retrieved a sweet potato from the fire, peeled it, and put it in the little girl's hands. He watched it all from where he stood, as if seeing the last 5 years of Morway Yun's life. Why is this hurting so much? Like, it's beautiful, but it hurts. I don't think Moran has ulterior motives in that scene, since he's always says when a person does something good to him, he would treat them nicely. That is fair. I'm just overly cautious by this point about the past Moran. Ah, Shizun's here? After a long moment, Chuaning walked over to sit beside Moran. He watched the roaring flames lick the underside of the wok for a spell, then asked, "What's in there?" "Peanuts, sweet potatoes, corn," Moran answered. "And now that you're here, a piece of candy for you." "Candy can be roasted?" "It'll be burnt candy if Shizun does it, though," Moran teased with a smile at me. So saying, he produced a piece of milk candy from his pocket and removed the rice paper wrapping. He clasped it in the fire tongs, and held it in the flames for a few brief seconds before pulling it back out and taking the candy. He sucked in a breath and said, "It's hot," then blew on the sweet to cool it before holding it to Chuaning's lips. "Try it." Not him feeding Chuaning now, like, they're just in a honeymoon phase right now, it feels like. But it's kind of like, because I have no real point of reference, I'm just thinking of like a marshmallow. Chuaning wasn't used to eating out of someone else's hand, so he reached out and took the candy himself. The creamy white candy was warm and soft from the fire, bringing out the sweet, milky flavour as he chewed. Chuaning said, Not bad, roast another." So Moran roasted another, and Chuaning took it and ate it as well. Another. Moran obligingly roasted 8 candies in a row. As he was roasting the 9th, a little kid ran over to ask him for a sweet potato. Moran didn't have a hand free and had to ask Chuaning to do it instead. Do you want the kid to die? Like, we know he cannot cook to save his life unless it's the one thing that he makes for you. Chuaning took the other pair of fire tongs and picked out the biggest one. Moran looked over and said, "Put that one back. Get a small one next to it. The bigger ones are tastier." "The bigger ones aren't cooked through yet," Moran said with a smile. Chuaning was unconvinced. "How do you know it's not cooked?" "Just trust me. I roast sweet potatoes in the wild all the time. Give him the small one. Those are sweeter." So Chuaning retrieved the small one instead. The little kid had no idea what a big name Chuaning was in the cultivation world. He only knew that he was willing to help him pick sweet potatoes. He sidled over and said in a small voice, "Dagurgur, I want the big one." "Tell that to the other Dagurgur," Chuaning said. "He's the one who won't let you have it. He says it's not cooked yet." The little guy really did run right over to Moran. "Moran Gurgur, I want the big one." "You'll have to wait a while longer if you want the big one," Moran said. "How long is a while?" "Count to 100. "But I can only count to 10, the kid moaned. Moran grinned. "Guess you'll have to eat the small one then." Or you could tell him to count to 10 times. Oh goodness. Chuaning set about peeling the sweet potato for him. He was almost done when the candy Moran was roasting got to its softest point. Any more and it would melt. Moran hastily pulled it out and offered it to Chuaning. "Shizun, open your mouth." Hands full of sweet potato, Chuaning opened his mouth without a second thought. It wasn't until Moran had popped the warm, soft milk candy onto his tongue, the coarse pad of his thumb brushing lightly past the corner of his lips, that Chuaning abruptly realized that he had eaten a sweet right out of his own disciple's hand. The tips of his ears grew bright red. Why am I such a sucker for things that are kind of like, tropey? It's not the surprising brand new type of thing that's happening, but I'm just living for every single second of it. Um, More? Chuaning cleared his throat, but luckily the colour on his face was camouflaged by the warm glow of the fire. "I'm good." Moran smiled. "Just enough to fill you up. There's only one piece of milk candy left, and no more, even if you wanted it." Relaxed and at ease, he had spoken carelessly and thoughtlessly uttered without a thought a phrase like, "fill you up." Such words were completely inappropriate from a disciple to his Shizun, words that smacked of pampering and domineering, like an owner feeding his pet, an emperor satisfying his concubine, words that could be applied to matters between sheets. the conqueror above using his scorching hot body to fill up the moaning person beneath. My goodness, okay. Chuaning was dazed for a solid minute, drowning in those crude words. When the rice was done steaming, the next step required hard physical labor. All the young men in the village used wooden mallets to pound the rice cakes. The village chiefs handed Moran a wooden mallet wrapped in gauze and was about to give Chuaning one as well when Moran held out a hand to stop him. He smiled. Village chief, my Shizun has never done this before. He wouldn't be any good at it. I mean, on the one hand, I get where Moran is coming from, because if Chuaning feels forced to do it and then fails at it and gets made fun of for it, it's gonna like sting more. But I also get the sense, and it's kind of been confirmed, that Chuaning is quite competitive. So it's kind of a lose-lose. Because now his competitive streak is going to be enticed, I feel like. Chuaning was speechless. He was quite affronted, a little indignant even. From the day he'd left the temple, he'd never been anything but competent and reliable. All he ever heard from others were requests and pleas, things like, Shizun, please help with this and that. This was the first time someone had ever stepped before him and said, he doesn't know how, he wouldn't be good at it. Chuaning was irritated. He wanted to fling his sleeves and thunder, who are you calling no good? But he held himself back. Moran wasn't wrong. He really wouldn't be any good at it. The village chief pointed them towards a stone mortar with a bowl of steaming cooked rice flour inside. Moran said, Shizun, when we get started, turn the rice cake over every 3 strikes. Be careful not to burn your hands, and don't do it too fast. I don't want to accidentally hit you. If you manage to hit me pounding rice cakes, you may as well quit cultivating and go be a farmer instead. Oh wow, ruthless. Moran grinned. I'm just saying, just in case. Chuaning wasn't about to waste any more breath on him, not least because the pair next to them had already gotten started and he didn't want to be outdone. He stood beside the stone mortar and said, get to it. Moran swung the mallet. The very first strike landed heavy and solid, sinking into the softly steaming rice flour. He swung 2 more times, then looked up at Chuaning with bright eyes and said, Shizun, turn over. So that's where the chapter title comes from. My goodness. Chuaning turned the bowl of rice flour over, and Moran continued pounding. It took only a few rounds for them to find the rhythm. Every 3 times Moran lifted the mallet, Chuaning would nimbly turn the rice flour bowl over, and the strike would come down just as his hands withdrew. Rice cake pounding might have looked simple, but it had to be carefully controlled, and the person doing the pounding had to have strength and stamina both. Oh my goodness. Look, my mind would not have gone there if Moran's mind hadn't already gone to several other places to set an example previously. Where was I? It took countless rounds of turning and pounding to make the rice flour sticky and stretchy enough to call the job done. After a while, Moran was still swinging his mallet with ease, but the villagers next to him were flagging. They started shouting, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, to the rhythm of the pounding. Intrigued, Moran followed along. By the time the rice flour balls were half sticky, everyone else was heaving with exhaustion, but Moran was unfussed, smiling as he said to Chuaning, again. Chuaning glanced at him. The young man's brows were covered in sweat, making his honey-brown skin sparkle under the sunlight. His lips were slightly parted. He wasn't panting like the others, but his breathing was a little heavier, the rise and fall of his chest a little more pronounced. Conscious of Chuaning's eyes on him, he paused before wiping his face with his sleeve, eyes bright like stars as he smiled. What is it? Did I get power on my face? No. Then, when Chuaning saw how hot and sweaty he was, and how he persisted in keeping his lapels properly folded all the way to his throat, Chuaning unexpectedly felt a little sorry for him. He asked, "Are you hot?" Yesterday he had asked Moran if he was cold, and today asking if he was hot. Moran was confused. The temperature was pretty much the same on both days. He stared blankly for a beat before answering, "I'm all right." "Take that off if you're hot. Shizun doesn't like it, so I won't." A long pause. "I like it even less when you're all sweaty." Since Chuaning had said so, the clothes were indeed uncomfortably sticky. Moran went ahead and removed his outer robe and inner shirt, tossing them aside on the millstone. Chuaning's gaze was icy, but the truth in his heart was growing warmer and warmer. He stared at Moran standing beside the millstone, at his broad shoulders and back and those firmly toned arms, and could practically feel the rush of warm air as Moran pulled off his inner shirt. Moran really was sweaty all over, his skin covered in a glossy sheen under the sunlight. Like a merman emerging from the water, he turned and smiled at Chuaning, looking dazzlingly, heart-renderingly handsome. The village chief's wife was going around, offering everyone tea. When she reached them, she asked, "Would you like a cup?" Moran strode back over to the mortar and picked up the mallet again as he replied with a smile, "I'm not thirsty, but thank you." Well, Chuaning sure is thirsty. I think he should maybe get a sip. A hand reached over and took a cup of tea from the tray. As Moran and the village chief's wife both watched in awe, Chuaning gulped down an entire cup in one go before returning it empty. "One more, please." "Shizun, are you that thirsty?" Somehow pricked by the question, Chuaning's head snapped up, eyes bright and tone cagey as he said, "Thirsty? No, I'm not thirsty at all." Then he gulped down another whole cup. Watching him, Moran was baffled. When had Shizun's pride gotten so out of hand that he couldn't even admit to being thirsty? I think the issue is not admitting he's thirsty, it's the kind of thirsty that is the problem, and I just saw the next chapter title, and oh my goodness. Let me just read it to you guys before I have to go. Chapter 141, Shizun, don't strip. And that's the cliffhanger I have to leave you guys on. Like, what the hell, meat bun? Challenge accepted, Chuaning. Oh, indeed, indeed. Okay, so we made good progress. We are on page 234. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought in the comments if you're watching this on the replay, because I know some people do that. And thank you guys so much for keeping me company. I really enjoyed it. These chapters are so fun. It's so nice to kind of have a little bit of a breather, even with all the thirsting that is going on throughout these chapters. And I'm looking forward to Thursday. We're gonna have it normal time, so 9 p.m. my time, 7 p.m. GMT on Thursday, and I will put up a scheduled thing for it like I do usually. Bye guys!